Before we dive into these stories that will keep you up at night, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't believe what people confess anonymously on the internet. And trust me, after hearing these, you'll want to be here for every upload. Let's get started. Some confessions start innocently enough. A stranger at a funeral. A moment of compassion. But what happens when that compassion turns into something else entirely? What happens when you realize you've crossed a line you can never uncross? I worked at a nursing home for years. Death was part of the routine. I'd seen families gather, cry, say their goodbyes. It became almost mechanical after a while. Sign the paperwork, arrange the viewing, coordinate with the funeral home. But there was this one funeral that changed everything for me. An elderly woman had passed. She'd been at our facility for about 3 years. Quiet lady, kept to herself mostly. When she died, I expected the usual procedure. Contact next of kin, arrange services, move on to the next resident. But nobody came. No family, no friends, just silence. The funeral home called, asking about arrangements. I told them we were still trying to locate family. Days passed, then a week. Finally, we found a phone number for her son. When I called, a man answered. His voice was shaking. He said he'd been estranged from his mother for over a decade. He asked me what she was like in her final years. And here's where everything went wrong. I didn't know this woman. Not really. I'd maybe spoken to her a handful of times. But this man was desperate for connection, desperate for closure. So I started making things up. I told him she talked about him constantly, that she missed him, that she was proud of him. The words just flowed out of me like I'd rehearsed them. He asked if she ever mentioned why they'd fallen out. I said she blamed herself, that she wished she'd tried harder to understand him. Every question he asked, I had an answer. She loved board games. She watched the news religiously. She had favorite songs. She adored the therapy dogs that visited. None of it was true. I was creating an entire fictional version of his mother right there on the phone. He started crying, actually sobbing, thanking me for taking care of her, telling me how much it meant to hear that she'd forgiven him. And I just kept going deeper into the lie. I couldn't stop myself. When he asked about her final days, I described a peaceful passing surrounded by staff who cared about her. I said she'd been comfortable, that she'd spoken his name near the end. All fabricated, every single word. The funeral came. This man showed up looking devastated, but somehow lighter, like a weight had been lifted. He hugged me. He thanked me for giving him this gift of knowing his mother's last thoughts. I felt sick. After the service, the pastor pulled me aside. He looked concerned. He asked me if I realized what I'd done, the implications of creating this false narrative. What if this man met someone else who actually knew his mother? What if he discovered none of it was true? But here's the thing I couldn't tell the pastor. I don't regret it. That man needed peace. He needed to believe his mother had loved him, had forgiven him, had thought about him. Whether it was true or not almost seemed irrelevant in that moment. Does that make me a terrible person? Probably, but I'd do it again. Sometimes people need a beautiful lie more than they need a harsh truth. Sometimes closure matters more than accuracy. If you're still watching, leave a comment below telling me if I was wrong. Would you have told the truth? Would you have let him leave with nothing but regrets? Hit that like button if this story made you question your own moral compass. The human mind can justify almost anything when pushed far enough. When you're drowning in darkness, when every day feels like a repeat of the last, when you can't see a way forward, that's when things get dangerous. That's when a simple text message can mean the difference between life and death. I've never told anyone this story, not completely. Not the way I'm about to tell it now. My wife thinks I was working overtime that night. She has no idea how close she came to losing me before we even got married. This was about a decade ago. I was going through what I can only describe as the darkest period of my life. Depression isn't always obvious to other people. You can go to work, smile, make jokes, seem totally fine on the surface, but inside you're falling apart. I felt stuck. Work was going nowhere. I had no direction. Every morning I'd wake up and think, this is it? This is my life? Another day of the same monotonous routine, the same empty conversations, the same feeling of being completely alone, even in a crowded room. The people around me probably thought I was stressed, burnt out maybe. They had no idea I was drowning. I didn't talk about it. I kept everything bottled up. I thought admitting I was struggling was weakness, that I needed to handle it myself. One night I got in my car and just started driving. No plan, no destination, just an overwhelming need to escape. I drove for maybe an hour, maybe longer. Time felt strange. Eventually, I ended up at this bridge on the outskirts of town. I parked my car, turned off the engine, turned off the lights, and I sat there in complete darkness. I don't know if I had a real intention of jumping. Maybe I did. Maybe I just wanted to feel something, anything, even if it was fear. 30 minutes passed. I didn't move. I stared out into the void, thinking the worst thoughts I've ever had. Thoughts that still make me sick when I remember them now. I was getting closer and closer to making a decision I couldn't take back. Then my phone lit up. A text message from my girlfriend. It said something so simple, so mundane. Are you working overtime tonight? When should I have your dinner ready? That's all it took. That casual, everyday question shattered me completely. I went from sitting there like stone to sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe, couldn't catch my breath. My whole body was shaking. How could I even consider doing something so selfish? How could I think about leaving behind the one person who actually cared whether I came home or not? She was sitting there planning dinner for me, waiting for me, and I was parked on the edge of oblivion. I sat there for another half hour just trying to pull myself together. Eventually, I drove home. When I walked through the door, she was smiling at me like any normal night. Dinner was on the table. Pork chops, vegetables, rice. I've never tasted food so good in my entire life. I hugged her harder than I'd ever hugged anyone. I couldn't let go. She probably thought I'd had a rough day at work. She had no idea she'd just saved my life without even knowing it. That text message was proof that I mattered to someone, that someone loved me enough to want me home, and that was enough to pull me back from the edge. A few years later, I proposed to her. She said yes. Every single day since then, I've woken up next to her feeling like the luckiest person alive. She still doesn't know about the bridge. She still thinks I was working overtime that night. Make sure you're subscribed because these stories only get more intense from here. We're just getting started. Some neighbors are annoying. They play music too loud. They park in your spot. They let their dog bark at 3 in the morning. But some neighbors are genuinely dangerous. And sometimes the only way to deal with them is to push them past their breaking point. We had this neighbor in our apartment building who made everyone's life miserable. Constant loud music, screaming fights with whoever he was dating that week, banging on walls at all hours. Management wouldn't do anything about it because technically he wasn't breaking any specific rules. My partner and I decided to fight back, but we had to be smart about it. We couldn't do anything obvious that would get us in trouble. So we started messing with his Wi-Fi. Every time we heard his music start up, we'd log into our router and throttle his connection. He'd be in the middle of streaming something and suddenly it would buffer or disconnect entirely. We did this for weeks, consistently, relentlessly. We could hear him getting more and more frustrated through the walls. Then, one day, the screaming got worse. Not directed at a partner this time. He was yelling at himself. Paranoid rants about someone watching him. Someone messing with his stuff. He started accusing neighbors of breaking into his apartment. It escalated fast. He started pounding on doors, demanding to know who was sabotaging him. Most people just slammed the door in his face, but he wouldn't let it go. He was spiraling, and we could all see it happening in real time. Finally, someone called the police. When they arrived and asked for his name, their whole demeanor changed. They knew him. Within minutes, there were multiple officers on scene. They didn't just arrest him. They took him to the hospital on psychiatric hold. When he came back a few days later, he actually knocked on our door. He apologized, but he wasn't alone. Standing behind him was this massive guy in a leather jacket, his probation officer. The message was clear. He was being watched now. A few weeks later, he moved out. The building went quiet again. He never found out we were the ones who triggered his complete mental breakdown. And honestly, given everything he'd put us through, the sleepless nights, the constant stress, I think he had it coming. Was it wrong? Maybe. Did it solve the problem? Absolutely. Drop a comment if you've ever had a nightmare neighbor, and let me know how far you'd go to get some peace and quiet. Don't forget to like this video if you're still with me. Addiction doesn't just destroy the person using. It destroys everyone around them. It turns people into monsters they never thought they could become. And sometimes, the wake-up call comes too late to undo all the damage. I'm not proud of who I was. This happened years ago, but I still carry the shame of it every single day. I was in my early 20s, hooked on cocaine, and I'd figured out a system, a terrible, exploitative system that I convinced myself was somehow acceptable. I started befriending young girls, teenagers mostly, 15, 16, 17 years old. I'd buy them alcohol, give them drugs, make them feel special. Then I'd sleep with them. Some of them were willing. Some of them I had to convince. And some of them I don't even remember clearly because I was so high. I told myself I was giving them a good time, that they wanted this, that it was somehow mutual. But I was 30 years old manipulating children. There's no way to justify that. No mental gymnastics that make it okay. My sister was one of my girls. That's how far gone I was. She was 15 and I pimped her out to my friends. I told myself she was making her own choices, that I was just facilitating, but I was her big brother. I was supposed to protect her, not exploit her. The drugs made everything feel less real. When you're high enough, you can convince yourself of anything. You can look in the mirror and not recognize the monster staring back at you. You can rationalize the worst behavior imaginable. I had a rotation of 4 or 5 girls at any given time. They were scared of me, scared I'd hurt them, which I did when I was high enough. Scared I'd cut them off, which terrified them, because by then they were hooked on the drugs I was supplying. This went on for almost 2 years, until my sister got arrested for possession and solicitation. I'd started having them find their own clients, sending them into clubs to bring back customers. It worked until it didn't. My sister was the youngest person arrested in a massive raid. Dozens of people were taken in. She ended up in a drug treatment center. Most of the other girls disappeared after that. They were scared, and they finally had a reason to stay away from me. Only Mary remained. Sweet, damaged Mary, who couldn't seem to break free. So I brought her to meet one of my dealer's friends. He said he'd pay $300 to spend time with her. My dealer vouched for him. I was desperate for money, so I agreed. The house was in a sketchy neighborhood. When we walked in, there were 3 guys there, not one. They had flashlights. They said the power was out. I was too high to realize what was happening until it was too late. They beat me within an inch of my life, broke my ribs, punctured my lung, gave me a concussion so severe they had to drill a hole in my skull to relieve the pressure. I don't remember most of it. Just the pain, just the feeling of everything going dark. When the police talked to me in the hospital, I didn't cooperate at first. Not until they told me Mary had been assaulted too, violently raped while I was unconscious, beaten just as badly as I was. That's when I finally felt guilt. Not when I was exploiting these girls, not when I was destroying my sister's childhood, but when I saw pictures of Mary's bruised and swollen face. That's what it took for me to realize what a monster I'd become. I've been clean for 5 years now, but Mary's still using. My sister got clean and went to college, but she has a pattern of dating abusive men. I know that's my fault. I taught her that men only want one thing from her. I taught her she had no value beyond her body. The other girls, I barely remember them. I'm too much of a coward to try and track them down, to apologize, to acknowledge what I did to them. So I carry this guilt alone, and I deserve every bit of it. We're halfway through. If these stories are affecting you, that's normal. These are real people sharing real trauma. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're not done yet. The next stories get even darker. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of the worst deceptions. Sometimes danger doesn't announce itself. It smiles at you. It brings you pizza. It becomes part of your daily routine until one day you realize you've been living next to a nightmare. About 10 years ago, I studied abroad. Didn't know many people in the country I'd moved to. Found a shared house with people around my age. They were laid back, fun. We became close friends, fast, smoked a lot of weed together. It was a good situation. One of my roommates had this friend named Frank who came by regularly. Frank stood out immediately. He was probably twice our age, maybe older. Had this intense energy that put me on edge from the first moment I met him. The first time we talked, he fired off all these personal questions. It felt more like an interrogation than a conversation, like he was sizing me up for something. But Frank had this odd charm. He was funny, always cracking jokes, and he never showed up empty-handed. Usually brought pizza, which made him popular with everyone else in the house. I asked one of my roommates about Frank's background. That's when I learned something disturbing. The year before, Frank had discovered his wife and her 2 brothers murdered in their apartment. He'd been under investigation for it, but my roommate insisted there was no way Frank could have done it. How could they be so sure? And why were they so comfortable hanging out with someone who might have killed 3 people? I didn't say much, but from that moment on, I saw Frank differently. Frank became a daily presence in our house. The more I observed him, the more I realized how manipulative he was. He'd say exactly the right thing to keep everyone on his side. Over time, I learned more about his background, all of it disturbing. He was manipulative, calculating, and everyone around him was completely blind to it because he brought pizza and made them laugh. I started avoiding him, making excuses to be elsewhere when he came over. My roommates thought I was being paranoid, but paranoia is just pattern recognition before you have all the information. And I was recognizing patterns they couldn't see because they didn't want to. Because acknowledging what Frank might be capable of would mean admitting they'd welcomed a potential killer into their home. I never did find out the truth about those murders. I moved out after a few months. But I think about Frank sometimes. Wonder if my instincts were right. Wonder what happened to my roommates who thought I was crazy for being uncomfortable around him. Trust your gut. When someone makes you feel uneasy, there's usually a reason, even if you can't articulate it, even if everyone else thinks they're great. Leave a comment telling me about a time your instincts saved you from a dangerous situation. And make sure you're subscribed, because we've got more stories that'll make your skin crawl. The internet has connected the world in ways we never imagined. It's made information accessible. It's brought people together across continents. But it's also created hunting grounds for predators who know exactly how to target vulnerable children. I was 14 years old, naive, desperate for attention. My home life was abusive. I wasn't allowed to hang out with friends except during school hours. I was isolated and lonely and looking for connection in all the wrong places. That's how I found Omegle. Chatting with strangers from all over the world felt exciting at first, and that's where I met him. He said his name was Noble, said he was 20 years old, lived in Missouri. He zeroed in on me immediately. He called me pretty, told me I was special, gave me the kind of attention I'd never gotten at home. When you're a lonely 14-year-old girl, those words feel like love. They feel like the most important thing in the world. My mom tried to shut it down when she found out. Took my phone, my computer, any device I could use to communicate with him. But I was stubborn. I thought Noble loved me, and no one was going to convince me otherwise. Over the next year, I was removed from my home multiple times, placed with relatives, put in group homes. Social workers shuffled me around like a problem they couldn't solve. But through every move, Noble stayed constant. As long as I had a phone, he was there. Eventually, I learned the truth. Noble wasn't 20. He was 31, a grown man more than twice my age. But by that point, I was so deeply groomed that I didn't care. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself he was the only one who loved me. Every time I was placed somewhere new, someone would find out about Noble. They'd take my phone, try to block him, remind me it was dangerous, but it never stuck. The second I had access again, I went straight back to him. At one point, I was living with my biological father. He caught on and did what he could to stop it. It worked for a while. I was on medication, in therapy, starting to stabilize. But then we moved, and I was pulled out of treatment. That's when Noble convinced me to run away with him. Told me we could finally be together, that no one else understood our love. So I did it. I ran away to be with a man who'd been grooming me for over a year. I don't remember a lot of what happened next. I've blocked most of it out, but I know it was bad. I know he hurt me in ways I'm still processing years later. I know the police eventually found me and brought me home. I'm in my 20s now. Noble's in prison, but the damage he did lives with me every single day. The way he twisted my understanding of love, the way he exploited my vulnerability and isolation, the way he made me believe I was making my own choices when really I was a child being manipulated by a predator. If you're a parent watching this, please talk to your kids about online safety. Monitor their devices. Know who they're talking to. I know it feels invasive, but it could save their life. We're in the final stretch. These last few stories are some of the most unsettling you'll ever hear. Make sure that subscribe button is hit and notifications are on. Sometimes evil wears a friendly face. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect children are the ones who pose the greatest danger. And sometimes you don't realize how close you came to disaster until years after it happened. I was a lazy student. Let's just be honest about that. I didn't do my homework, didn't pay attention in class, so when my teacher assigned me detention, I wasn't surprised. Frustrated, but not surprised. The detention was scheduled for a Friday afternoon after school. I showed up prepared to sit there copying notes or whatever boring punishment he'd assigned. But when I got to the classroom, something felt off. The building was nearly empty. Most teachers and students had left for the weekend. It was getting dark outside, and my teacher had this look in his eyes I'd never seen before, something that made my stomach drop. He told me to sit down, started asking me strange personal questions. How was my home life? Did I have a boyfriend? Did I feel comfortable talking to adults about private things? Every question made me more uncomfortable. Then he got up and locked the classroom door, said he didn't want us to be interrupted. That's when pure instinct kicked in. Everything in my body screamed that I needed to get out of there immediately. I stood up and mumbled something about having an emergency, about needing to reschedule. He moved toward me, saying I had to obey him, that he'd call my parents if I left. I didn't care. I ran. I sprinted to the bus stop and made it just in time. When I got home, I was shaking, terrified he'd actually called my parents, but they greeted me normally. He hadn't said anything. The next day, he didn't show up for class, or the next day, or the next week. Eventually, we were told the teacher had resigned. A school counselor came by asking if anyone wanted to talk about him, but none of us knew what to talk about. Years later, I became a teacher myself. One day, I mentioned his name to an older colleague. She went pale. That's when I learned the truth. He'd been arrested a few days after I ran from that detention, caught downloading child pornography from the dark web. When authorities searched his home, they found hard drives full of disturbing content. This wasn't a one-time thing. He'd been doing this for years. Maybe that detention would have been innocent. Maybe I would have walked out fine. But knowing what he was capable of, knowing what he was doing to children, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't caught that bus. If I hadn't trusted my instincts. I'll never know. But I still think about it. About how close I might have come to becoming one of his victims. About whether my gut feeling saved me from something truly horrific. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Your instincts exist for a reason. They're trying to protect you even when you don't fully understand why. Final story. We've covered manipulation, addiction, online predators, and dangerous situations. But this last one might be the most psychologically disturbing of them all. It's about how someone can completely upend your reality without you even realizing it's happening. I met Judah through a Friends with Benefits situation back in 2018. He came along during one of those doomed open relationship attempts. I enjoyed his company, but didn't feel a deep connection. Our interactions tapered off amicably to just liking each other's social media posts. After a while of no contact, Judah messaged me asking for writing advice. I wrote out several paragraphs of genuine feedback. He thanked me, and that was that. Or so I thought. Not long after, I started receiving vicious anonymous messages on Tumblr. At first, they were just insults about my appearance and art, random troll stuff. I shrugged it off, but then the messages became disturbingly specific. The harasser began implying they knew where I lived, knew what school I went to, information that wasn't readily available on my blog. I realized this had to be someone I knew in real life, and I suspected Judah. Extremely few people knew my Tumblr URL. He was the only person I could think of with any potential motive. I didn't think he was the type, but crazy people are good at hiding it. So I blocked him on everything. The messages got worse, more frequent, more threatening. They made fun of my disabilities, threatened physical attacks. A common theme was how being disabled made me useless and undesirable. Strangely, Christianity kept being brought into it, claims that my illness was God's punishment. I started dreading every notification, so I turned off anonymous messaging. But the harassment didn't stop. It just evolved. I won't go into all the details, but this person found new ways to get to me for months. Eventually, through a series of strange coincidences and some amateur detective work, I figured out who was really behind the messages. And it wasn't Judah. It was someone much closer to me, someone I'd trusted completely. The revelation was devastating. This person had been manipulating me for months, making me paranoid, destroying my sense of safety, all while pretending to be supportive to my face. When I confronted them, they didn't even deny it. Just looked at me with this blank expression. I still don't fully understand why they did it. What satisfaction they got from terrorizing me anonymously while maintaining our friendship in person. It's been years, and I still think about it sometimes, about how someone can smile at you while simultaneously trying to destroy your mental health. That experience taught me that you can never fully know what someone is capable of, that people can maintain elaborate deceptions for months or even years, that the person making you feel safe might be the same person making you feel terrified. We've reached the end of this compilation. These stories represent real confessions from real people who went too far in various ways. Some hurt others, some hurt themselves, some barely escaped being hurt. If you made it this far, leave a comment telling me which story affected you the most. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we release content like this regularly. Hit that like button to support the channel. And remember, everyone you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about. Everyone has secrets they'll never share face to face. The internet has become the confessional for our darkest truths. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. And think twice before you trust anyone completely. Because sometimes the most dangerous confessions are the ones that never get spoken aloud.